may have heard people talk about being in debt, but do you know what debt is? If someone is in financial debt, it means they owe money to someone. The person who owes the money is known as the debtor or borrower. The person or business they owe the money to is the creditor or lender. There are many reasons why people have debt. Some borrow because they don't have the money saved to pay for something that they need, such as a car to help them get to work, or for something that they want, such as a holiday. The most expensive item most people will ever buy is a house. Houses can cost hundreds of thousands of pounds, and most people borrow some of the money and pay it back gradually over a number of years. Whatever the reason for wanting to borrow the money, it's important that they can afford to pay it back. Another reason people have debt is by failing to pay their bills, such as their rent, electricity, or telephone. If the bills are not paid, people will be in debt to the people that have provided those services. So is all debt bad? Debt can certainly cause very serious problems if the person can't afford their payments and bills. However, debt isn't always bad and is actually an important part of the financial system. For example, many new businesses rely on borrowed money to buy equipment and materials, and most people wouldn't be able to buy a house if they weren't able to borrow. The number one thing to remember is that people who borrow money need to be sure that they can afford to pay it back. When people borrow money, it is often referred to as a loan. This can be arranged with a lender, such as a bank. When someone takes out a loan, they usually agree to pay it back by a certain date. They will also have to pay interest. This is what lenders charge in return for letting people borrow money. Let's look at a simple example. Sam applied to a bank to borrow £1,000 so he could buy a car to travel to work. He was offered a 12-month loan and agreed to repay the £1,000 back plus £200 of interest in monthly instalments of £100. This meant that Sam needed to repay £1,200 in total. So there are costs involved in borrowing. If we look back at Sam's case, we can see that if he had waited until he'd saved enough money to buy the car, he could have avoided the £200 of interest. People who are thinking about borrowing money should consider the ABC of borrowing. The first thing to think about is affordability. Can they afford the repayments? They also need to consider the benefit. Do they really need it, or do they just want it? They may find that if they save up instead, they can actually buy it cheaper as they won't need to pay any interest. Finally, what are the consequences? Who are they borrowing the money from, and what could happen if they don't keep up with repayments? We hope you've enjoyed our introduction to debt video. Some of the topics covered here are discussed in more detail in other videos in this series. More information about debt and the work the charity undertakes can be found on our website.